I'm John Baldovin. I teach at the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. I teach liturgy and sacraments, and I'm a member of the New York province. I've been asked to give a presentation to help us throughout the U.S. assistancy to prepare ourselves for the new translation of the Roman Missal, which will be coming on November the 27th, 2011. First Sunday of Advent this year. I know that this new translation of the Missal is somewhat controversial. Not everyone agrees with it. Not everyone is going to like it. I want to make it clear from the beginning of this presentation that in the first place, I'm not here as a salesman for this new translation of the Missal. And in the second place, I'm not really here as a critic of this new translation of the Missal either. There are plenty of criticisms that you can access in one way or another that have been printed in popular Catholic journals. What I am here to do, however, is to try to help us as Jesuits, as faithful members of the Church, as faithful ministers of the Church, to engage this new translation responsibly and to use it as well as possible. In light of that, I'm going to do this in 3 sections, good Jesuit practice. The first section will be a bit of a description of the translation of the Roman Rite and the translations, in the plural, of the Roman Rite up till today. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about some of the changes, not all of them, of course, but some of the more pertinent changes in the new Missal that we'll be seeing in the months to come. Lastly, since this is an opportunity, especially in terms of catechesis for the people of God, it's an opportunity for us as well to relearn the liturgy, or to re-engage the liturgy, or to renew ourselves, especially for those of us who preside, to renew ourselves in the celebration of the liturgy. So the third part of this presentation will be a bit of an examination of conscience with regard to our liturgical celebration, what today is being called the Ars Celebrandi, the art of celebration. So how did we get from the Missale Romanum in Latin, especially the Tridentine Rite, to the translation that we have today? I'll give you a rapid tour. As you know, with Vatican Council II, in its Constitution on the Liturgy, a great deal of attention was given to several things: a noble simplicity in the celebration of the liturgy, a reform and a renewal of the liturgy that had not been touched in many ways since the Council of Trent and the Missale Romanum of 1570 that followed only 7 years after the end of the Council of Trent. The Council wisely and memorably said that what it had as its aim was a full, conscious, and active participation in the liturgy. In light of that, of course, it was necessary to translate the liturgy into the modern languages, since people do not understand Latin. Here's what the Council had to say about the translation of the liturgy in general, and then about the translation of the Eucharist in particular. Particular law remaining in force, the use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites. Now, as many of you, perhaps all of you, know from reading the documents themselves, you realize that in many ways the documents stated a principle and then stated an exception immediately after. So a word to look for very often is but, and that occurs here. But since the use of the mother tongue, whether in the Mass, the administration of the sacraments, or other parts of the liturgy, frequently may be of great advantage to the people, the limits of its employment may be extended. This will apply in the first place to the readings and directives, and to some of the prayers and chants, according to the regulations on this matter to be laid down subsequently. These norms being observed, it is for the competent territorial ecclesiastical authority, which is, in our case, would be the United States Catholic Conference, to decide whether and to what extent the vernacular language is to be used. Their decrees are to be approved, that is, confirmed by the Apostolic See. And whenever it seems to be called for, this authority is to consult with bishops of neighboring regions which have the same language. At paragraph 54, with regard to the Eucharist specifically, they say, in masses which are celebrated with the people, a suitable place may be allotted to their mother tongue. This is to apply, in the first place, to the readings and the common prayer. What they mean by that, of course, is the general intercessions, or what we call the prayer of the faithful. But also, as local conditions may warrant, to those parts which pertain to the people, according to the norm laid down in Article 36 of this Constitution, the article I read before this. So what did the Council do? You may have noticed that in the Council document, it was the intention of the Council Fathers to have only certain parts of the liturgy translated into the vernacular, into the modern languages. But it became very clear soon after, especially because so many of the national bishops' conferences were petitioning the Holy See, it became very clear soon after that the entire liturgy would be translated into the various mother tongues. Notice two other things. First, the National Conference of Bishops, or the territorial, competent, ecclesiastical authority, is to vote on each translation. The vote is actually 2/3 plus 1, to send to Rome for subsequent confirmation by the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Secondly, several nations with the same language can combine together to produce translations. Even before the Council ended, 10 national conferences had decided to form a commission in English for translation, since no one conference, perhaps the United States is the exception, but no one conference would be able to mount a translation on its own. Those 10 conferences were the United States, Canada, Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales, New Zealand, Australia, Pakistan, India, and South Africa. They were later joined by the Philippines. The commission that they created was named the International Commission for English in the Liturgy, commonly known as ICEL. ICEL produces all of the English language liturgical texts which are used throughout the world. That was true of the translation we received in 1973, and it's true of the translation that we will be receiving in 2011. The Roman Missal was reformed immediately after the Council, especially under the direction of Archbishop Annibale Bugnini, a Vincentian priest who had worked on the liturgy in Rome and had been on the Papal Liturgical Commission ever since 1948, when Pius XII established such a commission you might remember, which reformed Holy Week in the course of the 1950s. Bugnini was the master architect of the liturgical reform. Working together with historical, theological, pastoral experts from all over the world, Bugnini and his team produced a new Latin rite for the Mass that was finally approved and published in 1969. It's referred to as the Missal of Pope Paul VI. That Missal was revised once again in 1975 with slight revisions and the addition of several new Eucharistic prayers, the Eucharistic prayers for reconciliation, Missale went to work as soon as the new Missal was promulgated in Latin, went to work and in very short time produced a new English translation by 1973. It was a remarkable feat. If you look at the length, the density, and the complexity of something like the sacramentary, you realize what a monumental task it was to translate so much in so short a time. There were a number of Jesuits who were involved in this process. Internationally, James Quinn, a Scottish Jesuit, comes to mind. The musician and liturgist from Australia, Christopher Wilcock, comes to mind. Also, two U.S. Jesuits, James Devereaux of the Maryland province and Dennis Smolarski of the California province, were also very much involved in the work of Missale's translations. Missale used experts in language, history, literature, and theology from all over the world to produce their translations. Frankly, in 1973, the new English translation was well received, but not with unanimous enthusiasm. I remember my own mentor, Father Aidan Kavanaugh, Benedictine, who taught for many years at Yale University, said in an address to the North American Academy of Liturgy in 1976, liturgical English is presently a pidgin form of the language, possessing all of the stylistic flair of a wet potato chip. Clearly, Father Kavanaugh was not a fan of the new translation. Well, fairly quickly, it became obvious to Missale and to the rest of the English-speaking world that the translation that we had from 1973 could be improved on. And in the 1980s, Missale embarked on a consultation, a worldwide consultation, bishops, priests, laypersons, experts, to ask if a new translation was warranted. And the answer came back yes. So from the mid-1980s forward, Missale started a second generation of translations of the various liturgical rites. The first two, you might remember, in the late 1980s were the rite for the anointing of the sick and the rite of Christian funerals. By the mid-1990s, Missale had prepared a new Psalter and a new translation of the Roman Missal. The new translation for the Roman Missal was sent to the various episcopal conferences throughout the world. Remember, each conference has to vote by a 2/3 plus 1 majority to send texts to Rome for final approval, for what's called the recognitio, or sometimes the confirmatio. The United States Catholic Conference, as well as all of the other English-speaking conferences, did this by 1997. At the same time, by perhaps an ironic or an unfortunate happenstance of history, at the same time, the Vatican announced that it was preparing a new document on the principles of translation to replace the document that had been in use from 1969 forward. Therefore, the Vatican turned down the new English translation of the Missal until such time as its new document could be prepared.